The World Bank is one of the world's largest financial institutions, and it consists of 5 major organizations that's said to represent 188 nations from around the world. Its stated purpose focuses on investing in the development of third world nations and lending interest-free loans to middle and low-income countries. According to the World Bank, there are 2 goals that have been set to be achieved by the year 2030. These include decreasing the amount of people living on less than $1.25 a day to less than 3% and fostering the income growth of the bottom 40% of every country. Are these goals sensible for the World Bank to accomplish? And more importantly, can they be successfully achieved in the midst of a significant shift in the global currency market? To help us break down the global financial giant known as the World Bank and how you can protect your finances during this seemingly unstable global market, we're joined by Karen Hudes, who is a former senior councilwoman at the World Bank and is the latest in a long string of whistleblowers exposing corruption. Hudes has launched a personal campaign to reveal secrets of the powerful World Bank, and she's been making the rounds on some of the largest television stations and radio shows in the country, including today on WHDT World News. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Now, Karen, before we get started, how did you become the lead councilwoman for the World Bank, and how long were you employed there?
I was there for 21 years, and I was actually interviewed for the job of general counsel. And I told the people that were interviewing me about this cover-up, and they were obligated to end the cover-up, and they did not.
Now, before we get into the cover-up, because that's why you're here today to blow the whistle on that, but let's talk about the World Bank itself. Most Americans have no clue what the World Bank's purposes or its functions are. Can you briefly help our viewers and the American people understand what the World Bank does?
Yes, it's right in the dead center of the international financial system. And together with its sister organization, the International Monetary Fund, it monitors all of the money of the world, the currencies.
Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve has been in control of the United States currency, the U.S. dollar, since 1913, and this year is the 100th anniversary of its creation. How does the Federal Reserve and the World Bank work together?
Well, the Federal Reserve the chairman of the Federal Reserve is on something called the National Advisory Council on International Monetary and Financial Policies. That's supposed to be the oversight agency. The Treasury Secretary chairs that group. The chairman of the SEC is on it. The chairman of the Export-Import Bank, all of the Commerce Department, all of the economic agencies of the U.S. government are supposed to be monitoring the World Bank because it has $180 billion worth of bonds on the capital markets. They fell down on the job.
So the U.S. regulators are not monitoring the World Bank?
They are part of what I call state capture. There is a corrupt group that has actually been called out by the foremost university in Europe called the Federal Institute of Technology, located in Zurich, Switzerland. 3 mathematicians modeled who owned the capital markets, and they found out that there was something they call the super entity, which is pulling down 60% of the annual earnings of the 43,000 transnational companies. And the 10 banks that everybody thinks are separate, like Goldman Sachs or Bank of America or Citibank, they all have the same directors on their boards. They're really, for practical purposes, one big conglomerate. And that group has been thinking that it's above the law, and it's not.
So what you're saying is that there's a supranational banking institution that has board members shared on multiple corporations, so they're basically intermarried banking institutions?
That's right. That's how we got the LIBOR scandal. That's how we have manipulation of gold prices and a lot of other nefarious goings on. And anybody in the government that tries to stand up to them, like JFK, for example, gets assassinated. That's what happened to Lincoln, the predecessor group. And when our founding fathers set up their Constitution, they knew about this group because there's actually a group behind that group. That's called the Jesuits. And you should read your history books to see what our founding fathers thought about the Jesuits.
Well, before we get too deep into all the tentacles of this global cabal, tell us what exactly you witnessed, what corruption you witnessed while working at the World Bank in your 20 years there.
Okay, I didn't know anything actually about what I'm telling now. I was fired illegally in 2007 because I was just doing the job of a lawyer who's working for a company that has bonds outstanding on the capital markets, which is the financial statements have to be accurate, and they were not. Anybody who reported poor accounting practices got fired without any recourse because the World Bank is an international organization and you cannot sue it in court unless you're a bondholder. So,
now, what motivated you to step forward with this information?
Well, I knew that that was my job, but even before I joined the World Bank, the man who had been the longest serving general counsel, Aaron Brockus, had warned me because he was there when Robert McNamara became the president of the World Bank in 1968. And he said if the president of the World Bank came from the Pentagon, there was no way that you were going to get the law enforced. And the lawyers inside the World Bank are the ones that have to enforce the law. So I knew we were headed into lawlessness. And the other thing that I knew was there was a very accurate model of the politics behind the World Bank. And I knew that if we didn't play by the rules, we were going to lose our leadership. There's something called the Gentleman's Agreement, which lasted for 66 years, from 1944 until 2010, that the U.S. could simply name the president of the World Bank. And so I warned the Secretary of the Treasury, Larry Summers, who lived just down the street from me, because our kids were going to the same elementary school. I warned him about this. I warned Chuck Hagel, who was then the senator of Nebraska, that we were going to lose our leadership because we were being crooked. And that's exactly what happened in 2010. And this model, once I got fired, warned me that if I didn't keep going and get things back on track, we were going to have a currency war with 90 to 95% likelihood. So I kept going. I teamed up with the World Bank whistleblowers. I teamed up with our allies, including Germany. When I went to Senator Lugar, I told him that the representative of the German government said that the board was treated like a mushroom, kept in the dark and covered with fertilizer. So when Germany asked for its 300,000 tons of gold back in January, and the Federal Reserve told Germany to take a hike for 7 years, that's an act of war. So I went back to the Department of Defense. I said, you know exactly where we're headed, and we better head this off. And I've been in touch with all of the governors on this. There's something called the Governor's Council, and Peter Verga is the Assistant Secretary of Defense. I've been working with those 10 governors. I live in Maryland, and my governor is Martin O'Malley. The co-chair of the Governor's Council is Terry Branstad, and I have been in touch with all 50 governors, and we've been working hard. I've been in touch with the county executives. My county executive, Ike Leggett, is the president pro tem of the Council of County Executives.
Well, let me jump in here, because you're obviously speaking to some pretty high-profile individuals. How are they responding when you go with them with these warnings?
Well, you know, the 188 ministers of finance gathered in Washington just this past weekend, and I went to Ike Leggett's office because I wanted to have clear instructions so that we wouldn't head into a currency war. You know, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have declared that they are not going to use dollars when they finance the trade among themselves. That's 25% of world trade. This is a terrible blow. And so I went to Ike Leggett so that we would be able to calm the markets and to calm our allies. And I had just been on a broadcast that Russia Today TV put out, a 30-minute interview talking about all of this corruption. And it was very important that we have the proper response. And so when I met with Ike Leggett's office, they told me to go to the National Association of Counties, which I did. They also told me to go to the National Association of Governors. I walked into the pension office because there's a lot of news that people don't know about. Did you know that your states could not issue bonds, or your municipalities could not issue bonds because there was no headroom. So I met with the pensions, all of the treasurers, the office in the National Association of Governors, and I told them that we had to have a concerted approach. And then I went to the World Bank meeting, and I wasn't allowed in.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because demonstrators regularly show up at World Bank meetings and protest. One protest in particular against policies of globalization in 1999 became known as the Battle of Seattle. Now, in the spring of 2013, you were arrested at a World Bank meeting. What were the circumstances that led to the arrest, and what was the outcome?
Well, I was arrested illegally. It was because of the corruption that I'm telling you about, because 188 ministers of finance reinstated me. This is because when the Congress approved the capital increase for the World Bank, they put a condition in there. They said, we're not going to disperse the money until the effects of retaliation against World Bank whistleblowers have been eliminated. And Secretary Geithner lied to the appropriations committees back in November. And I went there and I told the appropriations committee, and Secretary Geithner exited stage left right after he had finished lying to Congress. So this is a very serious matter. This is contempt of Congress. So when I went in the spring to the annual meetings, I was going there with the backing of the U.S. Congress. I was going there with the backing of 188 ministers of finance to end the corruption. And the reason that the United States citizens do not know this is because of the corruption. These corrupt entities have bought up their media.
Now, Karen,
and the Americans have been misinformed on very basic, fundamental things about their government. One of the fundamental things that they've been misinformed about is the fact that 49 of the 50 state legislatures have asked for a new constitutional convention. They know about this corruption, and they don't want the consent of the governed to be denied any longer. We're going to fix this problem. We're going to fix it before the dollar goes down.
Now, Karen, you're obviously out there. You're connecting with these people. You are blowing the whistle on corruption at the World Bank. Most people end up in a coffin when they go up against the global banking cartel. Have you experienced any threats on your life or any threats to your livelihood for speaking out in this manner?
Well, let me tell you, it has been the adventure of a lifetime. I was captain of the NYU fencing team, and I learned that the first thing you want your enemy to do is to attack you, because that's when they're on the wrong foot and you come in from the other side. So I have testified in the UK Parliament together with Elaine Colville, who's Scottish. We have the law on our side. We're talking about the rule of law. So every time somebody tries to do something, we catch them red-handed and we tangle them up and they trip and they fall. So,
well, I mean, but have they overtly threatened you in any manner, or how are they reacting to you blowing the whistle on this?
Okay, most of the whistleblowers are in a situation where they're trying to reveal information. I am trying to end a cover-up. So I'm in a much stronger situation, and these crooks knew that if anything happened to me, the cover-up was going to end. I hired a PR guy, Larry Garrison, and they knew that if anything happened to me, this cover-up was over. So I was in a stronger position. And yeah, they've tried lots of things. I would go to parties and there'd be really, really attractive people that all of a sudden were interested in me. These were the kind of people that when I was in my 20s weren't interested in me. I'm an old married lady. There have been all kinds of shenanigans. I've had people call me up that I know that say that I should do what's good for me and my family. I then go back and Google them and find out that they work for the CIA. I call them back up and I say, I don't know that many people that work for the CIA. Could you tell these people, if you run into them, that I don't intimidate? There have been all kinds of things like that, but I don't intimidate.
Now, Karen, in the legal world, as you know, there's a concept called attorney-client privilege. This generally binds the two in confidence to protect the client. Now, as a former attorney for the World Bank, do you believe the information you're revealing about the World Bank violates this attorney-client privilege?
Absolutely not. That's what I'm telling you about. I am obligated to get the financial statements correct. I am doing my job. If you look at the rules of professional responsibility, You have to report this up the corporate ladder, which I did. I went to the audit committee. I met together with the Dutch executive director, with Jim Wolfenson, and we told him that there was corruption and that the financial statements were inaccurate. And then there are rules for when you go outside. I exhausted all the internal remedies, and then I went to the Treasury Department. And when the Treasury Department didn't do its job, I was obligated to go to the SEC. I did. I met with the Serious Fraud Office in the United Kingdom, and they called up the SEC, and the SEC stonewalled the Serious Fraud Office. So I'm just following the book for lawyers.
Now, Karen,
I'm in great shape as far as that goes. It's the crooks that are in bad shape, and they know it.
Now, Karen, for the average American who may not realize how the World Bank actually affects them, how their policies affect them, could you share with our viewers how those policies actually affect them?
Absolutely. Think about the U.S. credit rating, because I've been to the credit rating agencies about all of this. I started going to the credit rating agencies when the serious fraud didn't get any answers from the SEC. And there's 3 credit rating agencies. There's Standard & Poor's, there's Fitch Ratings, and there's Moody's. Guess what? When those 3 didn't do their job, and by the way, why didn't they do the job? Standard & Poor did. They downgraded the United States. That's the first time we've been downgraded. And then Eric Holder sued Standard & Poor's. And the lawyer for Standard & Poor's said, why is it that Eric Holder started suing us right when we downgraded the U.S.? And the reason why the U.S.'s credit rating is going down is because of the massive fraud and corruption and the fact that the financial statements are inaccurate. And I sued KPMG because KPMG gave the World Bank an unqualified audit by breaking the standards. They wouldn't allow me to talk to the audit team. That's a violation of the auditing standards. When you audit the internal controls, that means that if the money is going the wrong way, people are allowed to report the corruption. And that wasn't happening. Now, so I went to the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. And what I have been documenting is something called state capture, which is that the institutions that are supposed to be protecting investors are not functioning. What happened with Bernie Madoff, this was not a one-off thing. I'm reporting that the Federal Reserve System is outmaneuvering every other investor, that there's nothing but insider trading. This is a very, very, very serious thing, and that's why the U.S. credit rating is at risk. Well, and now there's a 4th credit rating agency that's about to really downgrade the U.S., except that we are correcting the problem.
Now, Karen, I want to jump in here. You're talking about the credit rating. There's the debate is about to occur with the raising of the debt ceiling. They're talking about that now, and the government, U.S. government, has been shut down for some time now. How does that affect the World Bank?
The way it affects the World Bank is, just think of a cooperative, and the biggest farmer is hogging the irrigation machinery. How long is that cooperative going to last? And that's what you see at the World Bank, because Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are going to start their own development bank. Except that they see that we in the United States have ended this terrible cover-up of corruption, and we are about to resolve the problem. And that's going to bring us into a wonderful situation, because one of the things that's been going on with the cover-up is that all of the assets of the world have been hidden. We think that there's only 170,000 tons of gold. Guess what? It's about 3 times that amount. And that's all hidden in the bank vaults, and that's all coming out. And we are not going to take haircuts in recycling our debt.
Well, does the World Bank hold gold? Does the World Bank hold any gold?
What the World Bank does is it stands at the very center of the financial system, and it is supposed to certify that the auditing for the whole world is accurate. And instead, it's cooking the books for the whole world. That doesn't work.
The World Bank is making the claim, but does the World Bank actually hold gold? Are they just an oversight regulatory committee that just isn't doing their job?
Well, the World Bank is issuing bonds on the capital markets. It's getting the money from that and it's trading. So it's a real bank with real money. It's not just a regulator. It's certainly an active economic entity. But no, this gold is not owned by the World Bank. It is actually owned by the people of the world. And what's happened is the International Court of Justice has started authorizing people to prepare projects where this gold is going to be funding it. But I asked for information about what's going on here, and I didn't get any information. I got an offer. I could prepare my own project. I said, no, I don't go that way. I don't go that route.
Karen, it's obvious the notoriety of the U.S. dollar has progressively diminished over the past 4 decades of excessive money printing. If and when the dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency, do you see another single currency taking its place, or will this provide a competitive platform for multiple currencies?
We're going to have multiple currencies because nobody wants a single world currency. That's what the crooks want, and that's just not on the agenda. That's not on anybody's agenda. The real question is the transition from where we now are with this paper currency. And that's, that it's not going to continue. What you have now is something called gold backwardation. The leasing of gold, which is what central banks do, that ended on July 7th because it was too expensive. The risk of getting the gold back at the end of the lease term was too high. The leases were too expensive. And we had a similar situation come up in 1971, just before the U.S. went off the gold standard. So what I would say to people right now is familiarize yourself with payment systems like Bitcoin, because we don't know when we're going to get this corruption licked.
Karen, before we close the interview, I've got another question coming up. But before we get to that, how can our viewers research your work and track the information that you're disseminating?
Just Google my name, Hudes, Hudes, or you can go to my website, www.kahudes.net, and you'll find a lot of documentation there.
And that brings me to my final question, Karen, because amidst all of this financial turmoil, with the government shutdown, with the debt ceiling debates, with corruption at the World Bank, the Federal Reserve printing all this money, bailouts occurring to the tune of trillions of dollars, inflation, these are all things that are actually happening, and we have to face these facts. But what do you see as the solution to this global currency war, and how can individuals who are watching this program secure their families and secure their financial assets at this time?
Well, I have good news, because this very accurate stakeholder analysis is predicting that we are going to have rule of law, that we are going to have a solid relationship with our allies. They're all rooting for the American people to take back their country from this corruption. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And the way you do it is you write your county executives, you write your governor, you tell them you've heard from me, and I've promised you that we're going to have an end to this corruption, and we will.
All right, that was whistleblower from the World Bank, former attorney there, Karen Hudes. We'll be right back on WHDT World News. There's a lot more in store. For the rest of the program, stay tuned.